Welcome to the Man Up, Man Down podcast, presented by Volker Beluda and David Pawsey. We discuss the pressures and challenges faced by men approaching middle age that we're often too embarrassed to speak about with our friends. You can find us online at www.manupdown.com. Enjoy the show and don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review.
So welcome to another episode of Men Up, Men Down, and we're very pleased to have Ryan Parke on the podcast, the men's coach. So Ryan is a TEDx speaker specializing in how hormones, lifestyle, and goal setting impact male mental health. Having created an evidence-based framework drawing up on over 1,000 sources and his extensive coaching experience, Ryan works with industry leaders, charities, and NHS trusts who want to provide effective support for men. His 12-week coaching program equips men with science-based strategies to regain a sense of purpose and progress. Ryan, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Volker. Great to meet you, David. And yeah, thank you for having me on Man Up, Man Down.
Yeah,
it's great to have you, Ryan.
So there's a lot in that short introduction. So TEDx, if I say TED speakers, always, they're put on the pedestal. I had that discussion the other day with another former guest who didn't make it to the Brighton TEDx event, right? Whilst another guest of ours just made it to the Brighton TEDx event. So we seem to be surrounded by TED speakers. So maybe one day David and I go on a TED talk as well.
They're breeding. They're multiplying.
But there's a lot in there: hormones, lifestyle, goal setting, men's mental health. So tell us a little bit about you and how you get started with that. How did you start talking about hormones and all that? I mean, take it away.
A lovely question. So what got me interested in this, I would have to wind the clock back to June 2019, where I bumped into a lady who I hadn't seen in years, and I was really excited to hear the latest about her son, because Jenny's son, Brad, was taller than me, more muscular. Some would say slightly better looking. I know you two can't believe that, but a strong argument could have been made. But the important thing to know is Brad...
now.
The important thing to know is Brad had a fast car, a big house, and a great job. Plus, he was a dad with a loving wife. And I like to believe at the time that I was on the same trajectory as Brad, but I was just a couple of years behind because of the age difference. Then I saw the look on his mum's face, and I thought, oh no, what have I said to upset her? And she said, oh my gosh, Ryan, you're asking me how Brad is. You don't know. Brad's taken his own life. Well, I was really taken aback by that for a few different reasons. One reason was, of course, the initial loss of Brad. I was not expecting that. But the other thing that really struck me at the time is, up until that point in my life, I'd always held this belief, I'd always heard anyway, that the reason why men might die from suicide at higher rates than women is simply because they don't talk. And yet Brad was the most open and articulate man that I knew. In fact, I found out after Brad's death that 2 years before he died, he decided it was time to reach out and get some help with his mental health. One of the many ways he did that is he went to see his doctor. Brad's doctor did what doctors are trained to do, and so Brad was referred to talking therapy and prescribed antidepressants. Brad attended talking therapy, took antidepressants, and 2 months before his death, his mum Jenny, who worked in mental health herself at the time, said, Brad, call me every night, tell me how you feel, because you've got to get these feelings off your chest. Now, please don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting these things didn't help Brad, I'm sure they did. But what struck me at the time was, here was a man who'd done all the things that we tell men in crisis to do, and yet he still wasn't here anymore. I wondered, what else could Brad have done? And Brad's mum Jenny said to me, Ryan, you should learn about this, because she told me every 5 hours, 4 people take their own lives in the UK and Ireland, and 3 of them are going to be men. In fact, in the UK and Ireland, more men aged 45 to 49 die from suicide each year than women and girls of all ages combined. And I don't mean anything in terms of importance by that. I'm just giving us an idea of the scale of what we're talking about here. So I took what Jenny said really seriously. There and then I set aside one day every year from June 2019. Set aside one day a week from June 2019 to the end of the year to learn everything that I could about male mental health. And on my very first day of research, I never went to Google. I went straight to what I thought were good quality peer-reviewed journals. And I was reading a study that stopped me in my tracks. It was on life expectancy in men, and it just happened to mention that there appears to be one day every year where heart attacks in men jump up by around 30%. And yet on the same day of the year, heart attacks in women go down significantly. Folke, you're disqualified because
Yeah, he
I've
told me
asked you
before.
before. Yes, exactly. David, can you guess what day that is? One day of the year where heart attacks jump up in men and go down in women.
I want to say the wedding anniversary, but
Oh,
that's my glib response. I don't know.
so maybe if a man forgets a wedding anniversary,
Yeah.
that could cause problems. Do you want one more guess?
Well, Christmas Day.
Christmas Day is also a really good guess. So on Christmas Day, heart attacks do jump up in men, but they also go up in women, and we're looking for up in men, down in women. Would you like to know?
Go on.
So the day every year where heart attacks appear to jump up significantly in men and on the same day go down in women is the Monday after the clocks jump forward.
Right.
So in the UK in 2024, last year, that was that first Monday in April, but normally it's in March. And when I learned that, I had to know why. How could the same thing impact men and women so differently? So no single study says this, but what I could see from reading around the subject is when the clocks jump forward an hour, in theory, we should go to bed an hour early to avoid losing sleep. But has anyone ever actually done that? I never have. So when the clocks jump forward, it's like a mass science experiment where almost everyone in the Western world loses an hour of sleep at very similar times. Now, what happens in your body when you lose even an hour of sleep depends upon whether you're biologically male or biologically female. In a male body, losing even 1 hour of sleep has been found to significantly lower testosterone levels. And in a male body, as testosterone goes down, the chances of having a heart attack go up. And when I first learned that, I remember thinking, that's really strange, because I don't know about you, but at that point in my life, I had never heard anything positive about testosterone. In fact, I remember when I was a kid and there was a fight in my local pub, my parents' friends used to say, it's no wonder they ended up fighting. There was too much testosterone in that pub. Have you ever heard that phrase, too much
Oh, yeah.
testosterone?
Yeah.
It's a real cliche, right? So I thought, well, that doesn't make sense to me. How can a hormone that causes fights in pubs seem to protect men from having a heart attack? And I decided next week I've got to learn more about this hormone testosterone. So the following week comes around. It was my second day of research. And that day was all about testosterone for me. My first research question of the day was, why does testosterone make men aggressive? And it turns out testosterone does not make men aggressive. There isn't any real good quality evidence of that. There is evidence that testosterone calms males down. But the idea that testosterone makes men aggressive is just a myth that took hold decades ago and is very hard to get rid of. Now, knowing that testosterone wasn't bad, my next question was, why does it seem to protect a man's heart? Well, 5 years on, I can tell you there are lots of specific reasons why testosterone seems to protect a man's heart. But what I found out that day that was even more interesting was not only does testosterone seem to protect a man's heart, it also seems to protect his mental health. Multiple studies have found that on average, men who are depressed have much lower levels of testosterone than men who are not depressed. And in fact, some evidence suggests the difference is about 33%, which is really significant. The only study that I know of, the only study of its kind that looked at the testosterone levels in the body of men who had died from suicide, found that they too had very low levels of testosterone. And studies on living men find that lower levels of testosterone appear to be associated with more suicide attempts and more aggressive means. So when I learned that, I was suddenly very interested, because in the UK and Ireland today, the biggest killer of men from the age of 18 to the age of 50 is suicide. Suicide in men and depression in men are both linked to having a low level of testosterone. But the biggest killer of men over the age of 50 in the UK and Ireland is not suicide. It's not that suicide becomes less likely, it's that heart disease overtakes suicide in men. And heart disease, heart attack, heart failure, and high blood pressure in men are all associated with having a low level of testosterone. After heart disease, the next biggest killer of men over the age of 50 in the UK and Ireland is cancer. The most likely cancer that men will be diagnosed with in the UK and Ireland by a long way is prostate cancer. And you can probably guess where this is going. One of the single biggest indicators that a man will be diagnosed with prostate cancer is having a low level of testosterone. In fact, there's evidence that suggests that if we were to use testosterone to screen for prostate cancer rather than simply PSA levels, prostate specific antigen, we might catch more prostate cancer and when it's easier to treat as well. And the more I looked into it, the more I could see that all kinds of causes of death and all kinds of diseases were all associated with having a low level of testosterone. And I always start with this story because this was my first 2 days of trying to understand male mental health. And it completely flipped what I thought it was all about, because I started out with these assumptions, these ideas that I'd never even challenged. Ideas like testosterone's bad and men just need to talk. And really quickly I could see, hold on a minute, testosterone isn't bad, it's actually vital. But unfortunately, no one tells men this. And worse, there's actually stigma associated with testosterone that prevents men from finding out this kind of information where they actually need it. But the other thing I could see really early on is it seemed too simplistic, that stereotype that I used to perpetuate, that the idea that men were dying was simply because they weren't talking. You know, I'm not saying that's not part of the equation at all. I'm just saying it seems well too oversimplistic to suggest that the sole reason why men are in trouble is just because they're not talking. The evidence really didn't support that argument. So that was my introduction to this journey.
Long introduction, but a good introduction, or not good, depending how you look at it.
Scary introduction.
It is very scary. I mean, we talked about that before on the podcast, and the two of us talked about that. When we first met. I mean, would it not be really simple for men to just test their testosterone once a year, go to GP, get a testosterone level check, and you know whether you're good or not? Would that not be like the simplest solution?
So that would give people an accurate measurement of their testosterone levels, and that would be simple. But there are a couple of issues to that. And also, I'm going to explain why I believe that this news about testosterone is not actually bad news, it's extremely positive.
Okay.
But we have to understand a bit about how testosterone works first. So the question about testing testosterone, I believe men should be aware of their testosterone levels for sure. I mean, when I work with men in my coaching program, I pay for them to have testosterone checks at the beginning and at the end of the 12-week program so they can see the difference. Because testosterone is a lifestyle hormone. It responds very quickly to lifestyle. So then the query is going to your GP and getting a testosterone test. Last year, the back end of last year in November, I had the absolute honour of facilitating an event called Medication in Mental Health. And the purpose of that is to raise awareness of issues, primarily really raising awareness of the side effects of medication and how they impact different mental health challenges. But last year in November, Medication in Mental Health focused on awareness around testosterone. And I interviewed 2 former GPs who both said the same thing, which is that they weren't given any training about testosterone levels. And one of them actually, it was a really eye-opening story that he was a GP, his wife was a GP, his dad was a GP. And none of them for years worked out that he was suffering with the symptoms of low testosterone, because not only were they not given any training on it, but there just generally isn't awareness of these links that we're talking about here on the podcast between mental health, physical health, life expectancy, and testosterone levels. Even though I wasn't reading fringe studies, I was reading journals on, like things like endocrinology, and I was reading nutritional journals, and I wasn't just on Reddit reading people's ideas. So there's a downside to that. And there isn't really a consensus as to what a healthy level of testosterone is. Well, there is a bit of a consensus, but I'll give you examples, which is lots of labs in the UK will say if you get a testosterone test, you pay about £30, you get a testosterone test. They'll tell you that something like anything over 9 nanomoles per litre is optimal, about 9 to about 30. You don't need to know what that means. Just think of nanomoles per litre as the measurement. It's the miles per hour, if you want to think of it that way, right? So they'll often tell you that anything over 9 is optimal. But there are studies that suggest that below 15.1 is where men are at risk of heart disease. Depressed men, at least middle-aged depressed men, seem to be around 12. The men who died from suicide in the 1986 study that I referenced earlier, they had 11.4 nanomoles per litre in their blood. The same study found that men who've died from a sudden event, so something like heart failure, their level of testosterone was about 8.6. And once you get below 10.4 nanomoles per litre, your risk of having prostate cancer goes up by 2.5 times. So where do you get 9 from? And this causes a bit of an education trap, or a testosterone trap, as one of my clients referred to it, which is we can talk here and raise awareness of testosterone, and that's great. And that could lead someone to take action and to go and get a test. But firstly, they might meet a GP who says, why do you need that? And secondly, they could get a test that I would look at and think that's really low. And they would be told, well, it can't be your testosterone levels. That can't be the problem, because your testosterone levels are optimal. You've got 9.2 nanomoles per litre, and according to this manual, that's optimal. Whereas I would be really worried about 9.2 personally. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, but the reason I say that, Volker, is answering your question. There's a bit of a trap, a bit of a vicious cycle, and it requires more knowledge on a systemic level.
I can't remember who it was, but we had a guest who sort of mentioned that there's what they call a tired all the time test, which, is a blood test that measures lots of different things. And that's something they mentioned, that testosterone isn't actually one of those things. I mean, and sort of as you've been talking, I'm sort of reminded of conversations I've had with friends, literally in the last week. And, and I'm like, wow, if I wish I'd had this conversation, literally a few days earlier, because, yeah, that would have been another thing of, have you, sort of thought about that? And I mean, it is sort of something that, yeah, we've been trying to get sort of some experts on to test our testosterone as well. I mean, so is it? I mean, so I'm just trying to get my head round sort of, you test, and as you're saying, that it's almost like there's an arbitrary number. I mean, I don't know whether people have been, done a before and after test, so to sort of see at what age but I mean, so you sort of talked about a lot of it is lifestyle. So, I mean, can you talk about sort of what we could potentially be doing to impede our testosterone production?
Yep, that's a really, really nice question. So here's where we come onto the positive side of this, because hopefully I've scared the life out of some people listening, because, it's a serious matter. And also the reason why we need to be aware of this is because if you do some of the things that we're going to talk about in a minute and your testosterone doesn't significantly respond, then you do need more expert help, because there could be a physiological issue in your body that could be causing your testosterone levels to not recoup from better lifestyle. So it is a serious issue, and I hope that people listening go, I should be interested in that. First things first, sometimes I get accused of oversimplifying all of male mental health down to one simple hormone. And I understand why people think that, because I'm banging the drum talking about testosterone. But of course, there's a lot more to it than that. And there's many reasons why men could be depressed or have thoughts about suicide or be unwell, which might be unrelated to testosterone. So we're obviously going to acknowledge that. But it would be very naive and dangerous to ignore this really common link. And so at first, I wondered if this hormone's so important, and I can tell you now, years on, the real reason, and this won't resonate with everyone, but if you're listening thinking, well, hold on a minute, Ryan, I've never heard of this. The real reason is testosterone is actually a brilliant marker for something else in your body, which is called insulin sensitivity. It's a brilliant marker to let you know how sensitive your body is to insulin and how good you are at getting the energy out of your food. We'll park that for a minute, but just in case anyone's listening thinking, this sounds like something I've never heard before. If this was true, I'd have heard of this before, but that's the behind the scenes of it. So knowing, you don't even need to know what that means though. All we need to know is we need a healthy level of testosterone. If you're biologically male, you need a healthy level of testosterone. Right, so here's the big factors. At first, I always thought, I was optimistic because I always thought that the biggest factor when it comes to testosterone levels is age. And I'd always heard that once men get to about 30, testosterone levels fall off a cliff. And I'd heard terms like menopause, andropause, male menopause, and it basically led me to believe that low testosterone levels in men are an inevitable part of aging. 5 years on, I can tell you that is absolutely not the case. There are at least 5 really big factors that impact testosterone a lot more than aging. Do you want to have a guess? Throw some ideas at me and I'll put them into a logical order for you. Just your guesses are probably going to be right because it is lifestyle factors.
I like the little gamification here that keeps keeps you on my toes. I mean, exercise, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Testosterone,
Exercise is in
as
there.
far as I know.
It's not the top, but it's in there.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna basically throw in my last night's experience and say too much alcohol and not enough sleep. That's probably something that impacts it.
Probably both.
Well, yeah.
So here we go. Let's go through the top 5. You've named 3 of the top 5. There's 2 more biggies. So number 1 is sleep. And that's because testosterone is made while men sleep. In fact, there's a 2018 study that suggests that each single hour of missed sleep might temporarily lower testosterone in men by roughly the equivalent of 12 years of aging.
That's why I look so old.
It's those 5 a.m. starts, Volker.
Yeah.
They're killing you.
So, obviously we have to take that with a pinch of salt because it doesn't mean it's irreversible or anything. Obviously, if you're behind on sleep, then you sleep more. It's going to improve that. But it's to give you an idea of the perspective as to how much more important sleep is than age, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Age is almost incomparable to getting good sleep. It doesn't, sleep is much more important. So we have sleep. The next thing, and I would argue the most important thing after the amount of sleep we get, is actually diet, is what we eat. And there's so much to this. In fact, I have a 2-hour training that's all around what we should eat for a healthy level of testosterone, but I'll give you some of the highlights. I'll give you some broad strokes and then some really nerdy things that we need to know, right?
Okay.
So the broad strokes is that testosterone requires a healthy body and a healthy liver. I won't go too far into that, but it's to do with cholesterol in the background. And so good testosterone levels require a good level of healthy fats in our diet. And low-fat diets are an enormous problem for testosterone production.
I was going to say, when you were talking about almost the myth of testosterone,
Yep.
and I was going, oh, that reminds me of the whole sort of fat issue that, we sort of, these industries told us that fat was bad. And as a result, we've, massively overconsumed sugar. But, sorry, Ryan, carry on.
No, you're absolutely right, David. The modern diet's low in fat and high in carbohydrates. We don't want to demonize a whole food group. It's specifically sugar, which you mentioned, and starch, rice, porridge, bread. It's those carbohydrates. It's no bowl of porridge is going to ruin your testosterone levels for the rest of your life, of course. But in the long run, those high carbohydrate diets actually cause us to become less sensitive to insulin. And low testosterone is really a very, very early sign that our body's starting to resist the insulin in our lifestyle. So diet's the next. So that's a broad stroke. We need enough healthy fats. We also need lots of greenery, especially those dark green vegetables, like the kale, the cabbage, the broccoli.
What? Broccoli? haven't heard of that for years.
The things your mum told you to eat, Volker.
Yeah,
You remember those?
yeah.
And so those very exciting foods, they're actually full of vitamins and minerals, some of which actually act like a bodyguard inside a man's blood, protect his testosterone and make it last for longer. So we've got sleep, we've got diet. Oh, I told you I was going to give you some nerdy things. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, there's loads and loads to this. But here's a really nerdy thing, right, which is mint and licorice appear to block testosterone production.
Interesting.
And I was actually alerted to this. I was working with a man a couple of years ago, and he was, in his words, he was really depressed, and we were working on all kinds of things, and he couldn't quite make sense of it. I couldn't quite make sense of it. Because normally people have a bit of an inkling as to why they might be struggling at the moment. And he was also working with professionals as well. And I just noticed he was joining with mint tea all the time. And I headed to PubMed and I put mint, testosterone. Yeah, mint is quite a powerful endocrine disruptor. So mint and mint and licorice is very similar. However, ginger, which actually lowers inflammation, seems to be associated with higher levels of testosterone.
So I like to eat a bit of raw ginger.
Yeah.
Well,
Raw
for
ginger,
inflammation.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's always a good, palate cleanser.
Is it? I don't know. Not
Do you
for
not
me.
eat sushi?
I suppose, yeah, but no. Like, you don't take a piece of raw ginger and just bite it like a carrot, do you?
No, not like. Well, yeah, no. I mean, like, I'll peel the stuff off. But anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
Ryan. We've
Yeah.
gone down.
He does peel it, Volker. He's not,
I'm not a complete animal.
It never crossed my mind, to be honest.
Don't eat the plastic too, do you, David?
Yeah. I'm just looking at licorice because I like licorice. Licorice is good. They eat it a lot in the Nordics and in Holland, in my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't say it's not delicious.
Yeah.
It's tasty.
Wait,
I
you
used to love
said
licorice.
broccoli and kale was delicious, right? So
Yeah. So maybe I'm leading you astray. So we have and diets are a really fascinating one. So back before I sort of started talking about this on like podcasts and things, talking publicly about it, I ran a little experiment where I kept my exercise the same, I kept my sleep the same, I kept all the other big factors that we're going to talk about the same, and I only changed my diet. I mentioned earlier about a couple of different measurements of testosterone. The average for healthy men in the West is probably about 18.4 nanomoles per litre now, but it's declining all the time. It's declining very quickly as well. But the average is it's gone down to about 18.4. So I changed my diet for 8 months, kept everything else the same as much as I could. My testosterone jumped from 20 nanomoles per litre to 30. And I don't know, the men that I've spoken to that have had TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, theirs has got nowhere near that. Of course, there's a reason why they're on TRT, but it just gives us a perspective that we hear a lot about things like, oh, low testosterone, it might be down to microplastics, it might be down to chemicals in water. There's lots of different theories, and I'm not saying that we can rule anything out. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is we sometimes underestimate how much of it is down to our modern diet. The porridge for breakfast, the sandwiches from the petrol station for lunch, because we're running a bit behind. So we have sleep, we have diet, then we have exercise. And specifically, there appears to be a bit of a threshold when it comes to exercise, which is about 150 minutes a week or 20 minutes a day. Because there was a really massive meta-analysis last year of over 100,000 people, and it suggested that once you get to about 150 minutes of exercise a week, exercise appears to be 1.5 times more effective than antidepressants and 1.5 times more effective than CBT, talking therapy, when it comes to the treatment of depression, stress, and anxiety. And I think this is worth knowing, because if you have a friend who goes to see their doctor today because they're feeling depressed, it's very possible that your friend will leave that appointment with a referral for talking therapy on a prescription for antidepressants, just like Brad did, but your friend might not yet know that the single most effective thing they can do is something that has no waiting list, no lead times, no cost, no nasty side effects, is put on some comfy shoes and be active for about 20 minutes a day. And I think that doesn't take anything away from the effectiveness of talking therapy. It just puts into perspective how sometimes we're not doing the basics. We're reaching out for help, but we're not doing the basics. So there's the top 3. There's 2 more biggies. Do you want to know what they are as well? Or am I...
No, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
too deep a dive?
Yeah, that's good.
Cool. So we have sleep, diet, exercise. The next one is vitamin D.
Sunlight.
So, yeah, specifically D3. It's called a vitamin. It is actually a pre-hormone that animals make from being in the sun. But let's not get too involved in the terminology. So as you said, Volker, animals make D3 from being in the sun.
Yeah.
It's been found that men who have a low level of vitamin D3 have a very low level of testosterone. And there might be a causal reason for that as well, because it appears that D3 might play a role in the manufacturing of testosterone inside the male body.
Okay.
And actually it could also be linked to something else, which is both vitamin D and testosterone are both made out of cholesterol. And some of us might be on a diet or a medication that's impacting our body's ability to make cholesterol. So vitamin D is very important. Now, even in Europe, during the summer months, probably all you need is about 10 minutes of midday sun for a healthy level of vitamin D. If you're wearing sun cream or if your skin's darker, you need longer. But during the winter months, you would need about 2 hours of midday sun for a healthy level of vitamin D. And most of us, we just can't get that because we're going to be working, right?
Or there's not enough sun.
I think, yeah.
I mean, if I don't remember where you live, but looking outside, there's no sun. There hasn't been for the last 3 weeks, right? So would you recommend vitamin D supplements?
I don't need to. Our NHS recommend that most adults would benefit from vitamin D supplements throughout the winter months.
There we go.
Another interesting thing, which it keeps coming back to fat,
Yeah.
So
daylight lamps as well. There we go.
That's a consideration. Some people really benefit from them. So another thing to vitamin D, which keeps coming back to fat, which is vitamin D is fat soluble, which means it's absorbed in fats. And it's been found that if you don't have enough fat in the meal, when you take a vitamin D supplement, your body doesn't absorb it.
Interesting.
And so there's another issue here about trying to reduce fat in our diet, because actually our body needs fat to be able to absorb vitamin D from the food that we're eating. So we have sleep, diet, exercise, sunshine. And the last one, you mentioned it, David, sobriety. And I'm not talking about being sober for the rest of your life, although some people do that. That's my strategy. But I'm talking about time without alcohol. And the reason I say that is it's actually been found that each single alcoholic drink might temporarily lower testosterone in men by roughly the same as 6 years of aging. Which explains
David,
a lot.
you look about 90 today, yeah?
The reason I share that is because alcohol lowers testosterone in men. Men with lower levels of testosterone are much more likely to be depressed. And what do depressed men often like to do?
I'll drink.
Yeah. It's a vicious cycle that we just aren't aware of, I think. And sometimes we need some time off in order to be able to look after ourselves. And when I first saw that list of key ingredients for a healthy level of testosterone years ago, I remember thinking, oh crap. Because I knew Brad, and I know that, he did all the things that we tell men in crisis to do. He reached out for help. He went to see his doctor. He attended talking therapy. He took antidepressants. He called his mum every night to tell her how he was feeling. But no one had noticed that Brad was spending all of his time at work, heading to work, planning work. And I knew him well enough to know that sleep, natural food, exercise, sunshine, and sobriety, they just weren't on Brad's list of priorities. And I realized at the time, they weren't on mine either. And I started to believe that sometimes it's trying to be a man that kills a lot of men.
Hello folks, it's Volker here.
I hope you enjoy this week's episode. As you know, I coach executives, whether that is for leadership skills, or sales leadership skills, or working as a therapist too. There are few ways I can help you to get unstuck, improve your work-life balance, or become a better version of yourself. So you will be more productive and have more time for your family. Whatever it is, you can join my client list of people from General Electric, Pepsi, DHL, Boots, and many others. Book a free exploratory call via my website, www.obnat.us. That's OBNAT.us. Now back to the show. Now with the fat, sorry if I throw that in. I know it's a very serious topic, but so we need fat in our diet. Sorry, I have to bring it up. So if we drink a lot and then go to the kebab shop and eat a really fatty kebab, is that then good for us?
So it starts to get a bit complicated when we talk about fats,
I mean,
because there's so many different kinds of fats.
yeah,
So many different kinds of fats. When you eat a kebab, what you're going to get is also lots of protein and lots of carbohydrate in terms of the big bun, and lots of sugar in terms of the sauce. So that is not a good meal for testosterone.
It's not dark salad, but light salad, right? Light green salad. So
Yep. So the thing about fats, really, the guide is the fats found in nature are great for you.
Yeah.
The problem is when they're processed.
Yeah.
And lightly processed, and people might argue about, I'm about to say dairy. It's processed, but not, most people would say it's not ultra processed. It's not like a cake you see in the supermarket.
Yeah.
So the kind of fats that we're going to get, the more natural fats, our body needs them. The problem is the processed stuff. It's the canola oil that sits in your kitchen, that's liquid at room temperature, that's been highly processed to get to that state. You know, lots of people would say that's just not safe to heat up. You want to be using butter instead and heating up butter. It's other kinds of fats that can cause inflammation. It's essentially, if it comes in a wrapper, you know, especially if it's not dairy, then that's not the kind of fat you want in your body. And unfortunately, over the last few decades, as a society, we've made a shift away from the healthier fats, and we tend to eat more processed fats. And the evidence suggests that that's really hurting our bodies. So kebab, I'm going to say no, but you wish I said yes, didn't you? Kebab is the answer to testosterone woes.
I bet David is sitting there from last night thinking, oh, you know, that kebab wasn't as good as I thought it was.
Well, you had a burger.
A burger instead, right?
But I didn't eat all the fries. So
there you go.
There we go.
I mean, so you sort of talked about your diet was the big shift, and you've sort of talked about, you know, natural fats. Also, you've talked about how, you know, you abstain from alcohol. I mean, was there anything else? Well, you mentioned bread, so was that something that you sort of cut out, and grains? I mean, if you could sort of simplify where you were and what you changed to, that would be great.
Yeah, sure.
Just to see if I can pick and choose, you know. Try and get that kebab in there somehow.
So in terms of my little testosterone experiment that I did just in my body, sample size of 1, so we don't want to read too far into it, but it also taught me a lot about the ways to do it. And I've seen, when I've worked with clients, they've done something similar, they've always had a really nice improvement in their testosterone levels. I was working with someone 2 cohorts ago in my coaching program, and he'd been speaking to endocrinologists for 16 months about his low testosterone levels and couldn't quite find a solution. And at the point where he was considering TRT, his partner said, well, why don't you just spend some money on coaching? It's going to be less than TRT is. Testosterone replacement therapy, just so we're on the same page. In the 2 weeks after we did my workshop, which just shares, I'm not a nutritionist, it's just about sharing what the scientific studies say about testosterone and what you eat. In the 2 weeks after attending that, he doubled his testosterone levels. There was another guy who's in the previous cohort who, in the 4 weeks after changing his diet, was able to safely discontinue his blood pressure medication with consent from his doctor. You know, he didn't go rogue. I wouldn't want him to. And at the end of 4 weeks was no longer type 2 diabetic. And obviously, if you're taking medication, you change your diet, you need to speak to your healthcare provider, because changing your diet might remove the reason, the problem why you needed the medication in the first place. So you can easily end up over medicated. So essentially what I did to get my testosterone from 20 to 30 nanomoles per litre in 8 months was I just followed a low carbohydrate diet. And the interesting thing about low carbohydrate diets is you just end up not really eating processed food, because you don't find that many carbohydrates in nature. At least, if you look at the kind of carbohydrates that lots of people are eating, it is the bread, it is the rice, it's the sort of the porridge. So yeah, I really reduced them, and I increased the amount of fat that I was eating, so that I never was hungry for 8 months. I felt so good, I literally just carried on eating the same diet. It's just a low carbohydrate diet. There are lots of brilliant organizations out there that can show you how to do it. There's an organization called the Public Health Collaboration. They're a charity. They're on a mission to save the NHS money by sharing knowledge about low carbohydrate diets. And yeah, they've got food charts that show you the kind of foods that you can eat, and they've got different kinds of plans that you can follow. One if you just want to be healthier, and another one if you're actually on medication or have metabolic syndrome or something. You can look at those plans as well. But for me, it was about a low carbohydrate diet. And what I found is, when I started reducing the carbohydrates in my diet, I just had to stop eating processed food. Because when you walk into like a petrol station and think, I'll grab some lunch, and you're thinking, what can I eat in here that's got less than 30 grams of carbohydrate? Oh, nothing.
Yeah.
The full fat Greek yogurt and or maybe a sausage. It really just cuts all the crap out your diet. You can't, there's more sugar in a 330ml can of Coke than the NHS recommend any adult should get in their body in a day.
Yeah, that's why fizzy drinks, not good.
Yeah.
Not good for you. I drink, I'm not associated with them, but I drink green cola, so they don't have sugar in it and no whatever, sugar replacement stuff, and it's all healthy. I mean,
I've never heard of that. Green cola.
yeah,
Never heard of it.
they happen to have one here. Maybe we should get them to sponsor, right? So
I feel like I'm on Diary of a CEO. Like,
produced in Greece, so they're funny writing on them as well. But yeah, so a friend, actually, the friend who introduced David to myself a few years ago, he drinks them regularly, and I started drinking them because I don't know the word, bustapine or bustapin, this sugar
Don't know.
replacement, which is really bad for you.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say, that I know a lot of the sort of diet ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's sort of evidence coming out, well, but yeah, so obviously there is one now that doesn't even have that in. So.
Exactly. So it's all natural. So definitely recommend it, because when I drink water all day, right, I get bored eventually, and there's only that much coffee I can drink. So I do fancy a Coke or something different. And yeah, I now have the feeling I'm drinking a healthy Coke every now and then. Since I'm decaf anyway, it doesn't really matter to me if it's caffeine or not. So
I've never heard of it. I'll have a
there we
look.
go. See,
Thank you.
I don't
Thank you,
own.
Stephen.
Yeah, I don't only drink or eat kebabs. I also.
You heard it here, folks. Eat kebabs and drink green Coke.
There we go. So is it basically, if I summarize what you've been saying, is it all about diet? Is it as simple as that?
No, it depends on why a man has a low level of
Yeah,
testosterone.
okay.
So, for example, if we were like vitamin D deficient, then you need to sort that out. Although actually changing your diet normally changes vitamin D levels as well, because it's absorbed with fat, that kind of thing. But essentially, there's a couple of my sort of final thoughts on testosterone is, number one is, it's kind of the missing link when it comes to male well-being. And I'll tell you what I mean by that, which is it's easy to measure. It's easy to improve. We need to sleep better. We need to eat better. We need to be active. We need to get sunshine and sobriety. It's very easy to improve. If you were to decide 12 weeks, I'm going to focus on these 5 things. you would see an improvement. So it's easy to improve, and it just makes sense. It's the reason why we need to look after ourselves. We know we should sleep. We know that we should not eat kebabs. We know that we should exercise, but life gets in the way of those kind of things. And so this is the missing link. If testosterone is bad and the stigma associated with it kind of tells you it is, oh, if they're fighting, it must be because of testosterone. Firstly, that's nonsense. And secondly, let's say testosterone is bad. That means sleep's bad. Healthy food's bad. Exercise is bad. None of it makes sense unless testosterone is a positive thing. And so I think that this is just the missing link to men's well-being, because it motivates men and gives us a scorecard. You mentioned gamification earlier.
Yeah.
It like gamifies our health. It's a brilliant marker for insulin sensitivity, which underlines our mental health, our physical health, and our life expectancy. And so that's why I'm passionate about it. Having said that, there's more to men's well-being than one hormone, of course. And if you do these lifestyle changes and you don't see an improvement in your testosterone levels, as I say, you do need help, because there could be something underlying, something nasty that you don't know about.
So how often, maybe that's a final question, how often should we test for testosterone? I mean, I never tested my testosterone. I never had a reason to be honest, right? I mean, I'm not depressed. I'm feeling fine. Probably can do with more sleep. My diet, we discussed my diet at length. It's like, I'm
Green
drinking
cola,
vitamin
you'll be fine.
D3, I exercise. I'm sober some days. I mean, at time of recording, we're moving towards Christmas, right? But
Yeah.
any excuse. But I mean, we all know.
I know beer doesn't count when it comes to alcohol. I know the philosophy.
Yeah.
Beer doesn't count.
See, I'm a big red wine drinker. That's my challenge. But so we know red wine, kebabs, not good for us. My exercise is good. My vitamin D is good. My diet. I mean, we can all improve our diets, right?
Yeah.
Sleep. Yeah, I kind of look after my sleep. So should I test? Should I not test? How and if I do, how often should I test?
So me personally, to get my testosterone levels checked every 3 months. But you have to bear in mind that's because I have to practice what I preach. I have to understand what's happening to my body through my lifestyle, that kind of thing. I need to stay on top of this. Having said that, if you are feeling great, if you're not concerned about your physical health, and you had a testosterone test and it came back and it was somewhere over like 19 nanomoles per liter, then your lifestyle was probably in that dimension anyway. It seems to be working for you.
Okay.
Having said that, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And if it's a little bit below that level, then personally, I would be very interested and very motivated to improve that.
Yeah.
And get it, and then see how you feel when it's a bit better.
All right. Ryan, there's a lot to take away. I'm looking at the time, so unfortunately we have to wrap this up. I really enjoyed that.
Oh
David
man,
did
that
as
was.
well.
I mean, there's so much of it which
Yeah.
I don't know, just fits into other topics, and
Yeah.
No, this has been fantastic.
I can see testosterone, if I say, not only as a missing link from what you said in terms of health, but also if it takes a wider ecosystem of our podcast together, right? I think there's a link there that links testosterone, and unfortunately, it's obviously, as of your story and the background, right? It kills men, right? By not having the testosterone, and that's even worse, right?
Yeah, and I think in a way, the issue around testosterone is it's really just a lack of interest into what are some of the factors underneath, causing some of these issues that men are facing. The work I do now, I'm kind of known as like the testosterone guy. But that's because I really have taken an interest and gone in like quite in a deep way to how we improve this hormone and understanding it. But actually, first and foremost, the work that I do in my coaching program with men, it's all around goal setting. It's how we set goals for ourselves, how we see ourselves. The fact that we improve our physical health at the same time is just a nice little takeaway. So if you ever wanted to have me on again, be happy to talk about some other factors as well.
Yeah, we should definitely consider that, because this is so valuable. And I hope everyone who's listening is going like, okay, let's go through these 5 things, and improve it. If people want to find out more about you, Ryan, where should they go? Where can they connect with you?
So this is actually what I do for a living. If this is a job, it's my job. Obviously, ask my family, see if they think it's a job. But the best way to get hold of me is my website, which is themenscoach.co.uk. You can follow me on socials. I'm not very active on most of them. I'm very active on LinkedIn, but my social media handle is Ryan Parke and then TMC for the Men's Coach on all platforms.
We put all that in the show notes anyway. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Volker. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Feel free to reach out to Volker or David via our website, www.manupdown.com or podcast@manupdown.com, with any feedback or to let us know what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Hear you again soon.